back up. Sources tell NBC News that the whistleblower complaint at the center of the Ukraine scandal has been declassified with minimal redactions and is expected to be released this morning. Now to the 30-minute July 25th phone call that sparked the controversy. The memo released by the White House shows President Trump discussing Joe Biden and asking his Ukrainian counterpart for a favor. It begins with the president congratulating Ukrainian President Zelensky on his party's recent parliamentary win, and Zelensky discussing the reforms he's making. President Trump then talks about how much the United States does for Ukraine. Zelensky agreed and then said, quote, "I would also like to thank you for your great support in the area of defense. We are ready to continue to cooperate for the next steps. Specifically, we are almost ready to buy more javelins from the United States for defense purposes." Trump immediately follows saying, quote, "I would like you to do us a favor, though, because our country has been through a lot and Ukraine knows a lot about it. I would like you to find out what happened with this whole situation with Ukraine." They say CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike is the name of the cybersecurity company that investigated the DNC server hack in 2016. Trump continues, "I guess you have one of your wealthy people, the server. They say Ukraine has it. There are a lot of things that went on, the whole situation. I think you're surrounding yourself with some of the same people. I would like to have the Attorney General call you or your people, and I would like you to get to the bottom of it." The president then brings up Robert Mueller's testimony before Congress the day before, quote, "As you saw yesterday, that whole nonsense ended with a very poor performance by a man named Robert Mueller, an incompetent performance. But they say a lot of it started with Ukraine. Whatever you can do, it's very important that you do it if that's possible." Zelensky follows, "Yes, it's very important for me and everything that you just mentioned earlier. For me as a president, it's very important, and we are open for any future cooperation."
Now, it's very important there, Robert. The president, Zelensky, then starts talking about Giuliani. We know he's been calling. He's going to come over. And he says, without Donald Trump even talking about Biden, he looks past crowdsource. He looks past all the other smoke screens, right? Because that was just a smoke screen before the ass comes in. And then he goes, "We're going to help you with," quote, "that investigation, the Giuliani investigation." And that's when Trump says, "Oh, yes, you need to talk not only to Giuliani, but you need to talk to the United States Attorney General. And you all need to work together in smearing my domestic political rival."
It's been fascinating as a reporter to cover President Zelensky up close. I was with him in Warsaw just a few weeks ago when he met with Vice President Pence. And you see the Ukrainian delegation and President Zelensky navigating all of these dynamics. And you can see the bewilderment on their face, and when you pull some of those officials aside about what they're trying to deal with here. Is Rudy Giuliani a representative of the Trump administration? You see a president operating in his own national interest. He needs these weapons to deal with the Russia issue in Crimea. He's trying to navigate an administration he doesn't fully understand, but he's not going totally off course because he needs the funds, yet he's just not sure exactly when he meets with President Trump, as he did in New York, or as he did with Vice President Pence in Warsaw. What do these people need to hear? So again and again, in meeting after meeting, President Zelensky keeps trying to be careful, but say he'll nod toward broad themes of corruption. We'll work with you on corruption, but he doesn't make many promises because he doesn't want to get pulled into that riptide.
Right, and Willie, of course, again, it's important for everybody to understand, it was public record. It was reported information that in July and August, they were desperate to get the weapons transferred that Congress had approved, that Donald Trump just strangely enough decided just to freeze, and also to get a call and a meeting with the President of the United States to show his people that actually the United States would be a trusted ally in their battle against Putin's aggression.
Yeah, and that's why the argument we heard a lot yesterday that there was no explicit quid pro quo inside this summary of the phone call doesn't hold up, because we know what was at stake for the Ukrainian president. He needed those weapons to defend his country. We also now know, Jeremy Bash, that he had been harangued by the United States government, or at least by this administration, about this question of Joe Biden and corruption in Ukraine from the moment he won his election in April, where he got a phone call from the president. That first phone call, according to the New York Times, congratulations, now get to work on corruption. From that point, he was put in touch with Mr. Giuliani, who's been pursuing this line about Biden ever since.
That's right, Willie, and I think the transcript is not only a smoking gun, it's a smoking javelin. Because when you look at the defensive weapons that the Ukrainians needed in order to defend themselves, it kind of harkens back to, remember the movie Charlie Wilson's War?
Yeah.
When the United States of America, Ronald Reagan, provided Stinger missiles to the Mujahideen to eject the Soviets from Afghanistan. That turned the tide, ultimately, of the war. That's what was at stake. That's what was so desperately needed by the Ukrainian leadership. And here the president is saying, in direct response to a question about the defensive system, the javelins, he's saying, I need you to do me a favor. I'm one of the people who actually think that that is an explicit quid pro quo, although I don't think that House Democrats need to hang the impeachment inquiry on that. I think merely soliciting political help from a foreign government, in the words of Mike Pence that you opened with,
by the way,
that is enough.
Did you see Chris Christie yesterday?
No.
Oh, good Lord.
So Chris Christie yesterday, beforehand, George Stephanopoulos asked him, would this be quid pro quo?
How bad could this
be? And Chris Christie said, well, you know, I think the Democrats may be overplaying it. It would only be serious if the president said something like, I need you to do me a favor. Whoops!
It didn't age well.
Whoops! I mean, and you know, Chris, a former prosecutor, knows that's the sort of language. This is not a close call. You actually see at some point which people who's so deeply in it for Donald Trump that they actually, there's nothing Trump will ever do that will make them worry about this country. I want to ask you really quickly, Benjamin, about last night. The whistleblower complaint comes out. Were you surprised not only by Ben Sass's reaction, but by reaction from other Republicans on the Hill and their staff, quietly worried, saying this is worse than even the memo that they released earlier in the day?
Right. So before that happened, we released a piece on Lawfare that said, remember that this memo/transcript is only one piece of the puzzle. And the broader window that it opens up is undoubtedly much worse than the text of the memo itself, because this is only one interaction in what is actually a long pattern that takes place over the summer between the president, Giuliani, the Ukrainians, the State Department, right? There's a lot of different pieces of this puzzle. The whistleblower complaint outlines apparently a much broader array of activity. And so I'm not terribly surprised that if you find the transcript or the memo disturbing, when you see the whole pattern laid out, it's going to be really disturbing. Yeah.
And again, this, as we were all reminded every 1.3 seconds on Twitter yesterday, what the White House released was not a transcript. Thank you for that reminder every 1.3 seconds. So that's the best the White House had to offer, and it was not good. Republicans, of course, in the morning were shocked that the White House would release that.
Well, it's all been an incredible 24 hours, especially.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.